Feel for philosophy. Feel the thought, think the feeling.
Welcome to our new discussion on media ethics. Today we will explore definition, nature, scope, and historical development of the media ethics. Please stay with us. Presented by Feel for Philosophy.
Media ethics. Do those two words sometimes feel like they just don't go together? In a world that's all about breaking news, getting clicks, and hitting deadlines, where does something as slow and careful as morality even fit? Well, today, we're going to try and piece together this fascinating and honestly super important puzzle. So let's kick things off with a really foundational question. Ethics matter for everyone, right? But why do we have this whole separate category called media ethics? Is being an ethical journalist somehow different from just being an ethical person? And the short answer is, yeah, it kind of is. And it's for a really interesting reason. Media ethics is a specific type of applied ethics, which is basically about taking those big general moral rules we all know and figuring out how they work in the messy, high-stakes world of a specific job.
At first glance, you might think these two things are worlds apart. Journalism is about the facts, what happened, who, where, when. And ethics, well, that's about values, right and wrong. So are they always fighting each other? As we're about to see, they're actually way more connected than you might think.
I love how the philosopher Matthew Kieran puts it here. He says that good journalism and ethics aren't fighting at all. They actually need each other. Think about it for a second. What is a journalist's number one job? To get to the truth, right? So when a reporter twists the facts or misleads people, they're not just being unethical, they're also just being a bad journalist. They're failing at their core mission.
Now, to really wrap our heads around the tough calls journalists have to make every single day, we need to understand two big philosophical ideas that are constantly playing tug-of-war in the newsroom.
First up, we've got utilitarianism. This is the idea that an action is right or wrong based purely on its consequences. It's all about the final score. The right move is whatever creates the most good for the most people. So a journalist might use this to justify leaking a secret government document. Sure, it might cause some harm, but if it exposes massive corruption that helps millions of citizens, a utilitarian would say was the right thing to do. The ends justify the means. But on the other side of the ring, you have deontology. This is a view that's famously tied to the philosopher Immanuel Kant. And this philosophy says, hold on a second. Some actions are just inherently right or wrong, and the consequences don't matter. It's not about the outcome, it's about your duty. Things like telling the truth or keeping a promise. Those are moral rules you just don't break. Period.
And this is where it gets so incredibly difficult. This perfectly illustrates the tightrope journalist walk. So imagine a reporter has a source who can blow the lid off a huge scandal, but outing that source is the only way to do it. The utilitarian part of your brain says, do it, it serves the greater good. But the deontologist in you screams, no way. A journalist has a sacred duty, a promise to protect their source. Breaking that promise is just wrong, no matter how much good it might do. And there's no easy answer.
Okay, so theory is one thing. But what happens when these ethical puzzles aren't just in a textbook? What happens when they have real life-or-death consequences? We're going to look at a real-world case from India now, and it's a truly heartbreaking lesson in what happens when media ethics completely collapse. This is the story of Goria. Her husband, a soldier, was presumed dead after a war. 5 years later, she had moved on, she had remarried, and then the unbelievable happened. Her first husband was found alive and came back home to find Goria pregnant with her new husband's child. The media absolutely swarmed this story. They turned her incredibly private, painful dilemma into a national reality show, constantly asking who will Goria choose. The pressure was immense, and eventually she was essentially forced to go back to her first husband. And tragically, the mental stress of it all was just too much. She died not long after.
And this quote right here, this gets to the absolute core of the ethical failure. The media completely confused what is genuinely in the public interest with what just feeds public curiosity. Goria's personal tragedy wasn't a matter of public interest. It was a private horror story that was turned into a spectacle to boost ratings.
And here's the absolute most cynical, most awful part of the story. As soon as Goria died, the media that had turned her into a household name, they just moved on. The story wasn't trending anymore. It's a brutal example of what some call use and throw journalism, where human beings become disposable content.
This fear about the power of the media and what it's doing to us, it isn't new, not by a long shot. In fact,
these anxieties about how new ways of sharing information mess with our morals, they go back thousands of years. Let's zoom out and connect this all the way back to ancient Greece. Check this out, because this is kind of mind-blowing. Back in the 4th century BCE, the great philosopher Plato was seriously stressed out about a new, disruptive technology, writing. Now, flash forward to today, and we're having almost the exact same panicked conversations about artificial intelligence. It seems like our fear isn't really about the tech itself, but about how it might change us.
So what was Plato's beef with writing? Well, he basically argued that it separates knowledge from a living, breathing person. A real conversation, a dialogue, is alive. You can question it, you can push back, you can understand the context. But a written text, he said, that's just a dead picture of a real conversation. I mean, you can't argue with a book, right? It just sits there.
Okay, now look at our fears about AI. We worry that it can bake in our worst biases, that its decisions are a mystery, made inside a black box we can't understand, that it removes that crucial human context, and we ask, who's responsible when it gets things wrong? It's uncanny, isn't it? Plato's ancient fears about taking information out of context and removing accountability are the very same fears we have about AI today.
So AI in the newsroom is a classic double-edged sword. On one hand, wow, what a powerful tool. It can comb through massive amounts of data for investigative journalism. It can help fact-check in seconds. It can even write routine news reports. But the ethical landmines are huge. You get algorithmic bias, major privacy concerns, and that giant question of accountability. If an AI-written story ruins someone's life, who's to blame? The programmer? The news outlet? The AI itself? It's a total mess. So, with all of this, from ancient debates to futuristic tech, where does that leave us? How do we even begin to protect media ethics as we move forward? What's the plan?
Well, historically, you basically had two extremes. The authoritarian model, where the government just tells the press what to say, and the libertarian model, which says the press should be totally free, and the best ideas will naturally win out in a marketplace of ideas. But today, most democracies try for something in the middle, self-regulation. This is where news organizations create their own codes of conduct. They hire ombudsmen, who are basically internal critics that represent the public, and they form independent councils to hold themselves accountable.
But the biggest, most radical change of our time is this idea right here. The lines have completely blurred. With a phone in every pocket and social media at our fingertips, the power to broadcast information isn't just for the big newsrooms anymore. In a very real way, we are all publishers now.
And that leads us to one final, and maybe the most important question of all. All these ethical principles we've been talking about, verifying your facts, being sensitive to others, trying to do no harm, staying impartial, are those just for professional journalists anymore? Or, in this wild new world where every one of us can create and share and influence, does a piece of that ethical weight now rest on all of our shoulders?
Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support encourages me to create more content. Thank you.